Charles Manson's face morphing with Hollywood stars he knew. Celebrity connections text. Helter-skelter imagery mixed with movie cameras from parole to producer. Manson's dangerous L.A. dream. Charles Manson's journey to infamy began not in some remote, shadowy corner of the nation, but directly in the glamorous glow of Los Angeles, California. He was a man obsessed with attaining the recognition and fame that Hollywood promised, viewing it as the ultimate validation of his self-proclaimed genius and the only path to true authority. When he was released from a federal penitentiary in March of 1967, after spending more than half of his 32 years incarcerated, he was faced with the prospect of freedom. His desire was not to return to the straight life, but to immediately enter the music scene. His first stop wasn't a flophouse. It was the door of a former MGM child star, a connection that quickly failed, but proved his singular focus on using celebrity access as a shortcut to stardom. He saw himself as a philosopher-musician, believing his time in prison, where he studied social manipulation, had given him a unique prophetic vision that the world, and especially Hollywood, desperately needed to hear. He was convinced that the chaotic cultural upheaval of the late 1960s, with its search for new answers, was the perfect moment for his unique, aggressive musical style to break through and challenge the establishment. Manson arrived in San Francisco during the Summer of Love, but quickly migrated south to the heart of the music and film industry, recognizing Los Angeles as the true engine of fame and the center of the music business he wished to conquer. He was a small man with an outsized ego and a talent for manipulative charisma, qualities that helped him thrive in the superficial, star-worshipping atmosphere of the canyons. He taught himself to play the guitar during his prison sentences and believed, with absolute conviction, that he was destined for musical stardom. He even adopted the persona of a street troubadour, carrying his guitar everywhere to attract attention, positioning himself as an authentic voice against the commercialism of pop music, which ironically, he desperately wanted to join and exploit. This fervent ambition was his ticket into the unsuspecting upper echelons of Hollywood. The timing was crucial. The late 1960s in Los Angeles were defined by excess, spiritual experimentation, and a dangerous willingness among the young and wealthy to embrace gurus and outsiders, seeking spiritual answers in the wake of immense material comfort and social unrest. This cultural atmosphere provided the perfect protective cloak for a cult leader to operate, allowing him to bypass the usual barriers of entry into the exclusive social circles, which were constantly seeking the next authentic voice to champion, often valuing eccentricity over substance. Manson quickly began collecting followers, mostly young women searching for meaning and acceptance, offering them an illusion of familial belonging and purpose, demanding their total loyalty in return. He established his family, a nomadic commune that soon became fixated on facilitating his music career. The initial goal was not violence. It was a record deal, an official stamp of approval from the very establishment he claimed to despise, which he viewed as the key to power and respectability. His path, therefore, led him directly to the most powerful and socially influential people in the industry, including those who had the power to make or break a career instantly, such as producers and major studio figures who frequented the Laurel Canyon scene. These individuals, often blinded by their own privilege and the decades' search for authenticity, saw Charles Manson not as a hardened criminal, but as an eccentric, potentially talented songwriter from the streets, a rough diamond worth polishing, tragically ignoring the danger signs that were clearly present in his erratic behavior and aggressive philosophies. He was soon rubbing shoulders with the kind of people whose names topped marquees: Doris Day's son, Frank Sinatra's friend, a golden age screen siren. These were the doors his guitar opened, granting him access that career criminals rarely attain, placing him directly on the map of Hollywood's social scene and giving him a false sense of security regarding his acceptance and imminent success. The story of Manson's entry into the LA scene is a sobering example of how the beautiful and careless openness of the era provided access to a menace that should have remained locked away. The wealthy of Laurel Canyon and Malibu were looking for experience, and Manson was selling a philosophy that promised freedom from inhibition, a message that resonated powerfully with certain insecure, influential personalities searching for a meaning beyond material wealth, a spiritual cure for their emptiness, making them easy targets for his manipulation. He specifically targeted those who were emotionally adrift despite their financial success, preying on the inherent loneliness that often accompanies fame and the relentless pressure of maintaining a public persona, offering them the illusion of deep, unfiltered connection and belonging through his family. He and his followers moved through the canyons of Los Angeles, occasionally pitching up at the homes of musicians and minor celebrities. They were dismissed as eccentric hippies, a common sight at the time, barely worth a second glance by police or neighbors, which served as perfect cover for their increasingly unstable activities. Yet, this acceptance was lethal. The celebrity connections that followed were not random. They were methodically sought out by Manson as stepping stones to the fame he craved, each introduction a calculated move up the social ladder toward his goal of professional validation and power. The stage was being set for a confrontation between the world of manufactured elegance and a genuine, terrifying darkness that had been invited right through the front door, blurring the lines between fantasy and reality with ruinous consequences. The contrast between the Hollywood dream factory and the nightmare that unfolded is precisely what makes this story so profoundly disturbing. Manson's fixation on fame was the key that unlocked the gates of doom, leading him from a prison cell to the doorsteps of Bel Air's elite and setting the timer for a devastating cultural explosion that would consume the decade's innocence and permanently redefine security in Hollywood. A beautiful lie, the beach boy who fell under Manson's spell. The critical turning point in Charles Manson's infiltration of Hollywood arrived through an accidental encounter with a member of rock music royalty, Dennis Wilson of the renowned musical group, the Beach Boys. In the spring of 1968, Wilson, known for his free-spirited approach to life and his tendency toward excess, was driving along Malibu's coastline when he picked up two young women who were hitchhiking, a casual act of the era that carried unforeseen peril, as these women were actively seeking celebrity contacts. These women were members of Manson's family, strategically placed to seek out wealthy, influential targets to advance their leaders' goals and secure resources. Wilson, captivated by their stories of a spiritual guru, invited them back to his expansive Pacific Palisades residence, a beautiful Spanish-style home valued at $100,000, a substantial sum for the time, believing he was opening his doors to artistic curiosity and spiritual exchange, reflecting the era's naive openness. Later that night, returning home from a recording session, Wilson encountered Manson for the very first time. Manson was sitting on his floor, having walked in unannounced, an immediate and unsettling breach of privacy. Wilson asked him what he was doing there. Manson responded by kneeling, kissing Wilson's feet, and explaining his philosophy, a dramatic gesture calculated to establish dominance through apparent humility and submission. Wilson later recalled being stunned and impressed by his strange charisma, initially referring to Manson as a spiritual seeker. This immediate, almost worshipful deference from Manson disarmed Wilson completely, exploiting the musician's own emotional vulnerabilities and making him susceptible to the cult leader's manipulative influence, especially during a turbulent period in Wilson's own life when he was searching for meaning. Within days, the entire Manson family, numbering approximately 12 to 18 people, moved into Wilson's home without permission, parking their dilapidated bus in his driveway and transforming his elegant residence into a squalid commune, disrespecting his property and privacy immediately and completely. The arrangement quickly became disastrous for the musician. Wilson, an emotionally vulnerable man struggling with his own personal issues and an already turbulent private life, found himself unable to evict them due to Manson's psychological hold, fearing both confrontation and the loss of the strange spiritual experience, allowing the situation to spiral out of control. The house became the site of chaos and exploitation, disrupting Wilson's professional and personal life severely. The total cost to Wilson, both financially and professionally, was immense. The family consumed his resources, racking up bills for food and repairs, and even totaled one of his prized automobiles by taking it for an unauthorized joyride and crashing it beyond repair. Wilson estimated the total financial loss he incurred during this brief period at roughly $100,000, effectively the value of his entire home, an expense that severely damaged his already shaky finances and led to confrontations with his financial manager, forcing him into a deeper personal crisis and financial ruin. More consequentially, Manson began to exploit Wilson's influence, using the star as a direct conduit to the powerful music industry figures he needed to meet, pressuring Wilson relentlessly to secure his contract and introduce him to producers. Wilson's lapse in judgment placed the entire Hollywood community in extreme peril. He would eventually flee his own house, unable to bear the chaos or confront Manson, leaving the family in place, essentially abandoning his home to escape their toxic presence, moving in with a friend, and spending time sleeping on the couches of recording studios, a true reversal of fortune for a rock star. This connection demonstrated the dangerous power an outsider like Manson could wield simply by finding one single, vulnerable star willing to open his gilded cage, granting him access to the elite of the entertainment world. Wilson even helped arrange for two of Manson's songs, one titled "Cease to Exist," to be recorded by the Beach Boys, though the lyrics and title were changed. A small professional victory that only emboldened Manson further, convincing him his Hollywood destiny was close at hand and fueling his sense of entitlement over the industry's ultimate recognition. We have now seen how Charles Manson, fueled by his obsession with fame, infiltrated the music scene by exploiting the vulnerability of a major star, Dennis Wilson, and gained access to the inner circles of Hollywood. If you are finding this exploration of Hollywood's darkest moments compelling, please consider subscribing to Golden Age Files. We dedicate ourselves to finding and sharing these deeply human, often startling, stories that lie beneath the polish and glamour of classic cinema. Your support ensures that we can continue bringing you these detailed, respectful, historical accounts and uncovering more hidden chapters of Hollywood history. The producer who said no, how a simple decision sealed a tragic fate. The single most consequential introduction Dennis Wilson made for Charles Manson was to his friend, the record producer Terry Melcher. Melcher, a pivotal figure in the 1960s music scene, was not just any producer. He was a gatekeeper of popular music, possessing the power to launch or destroy careers instantly with a word. He was the son of Hollywood royalty, the legendary actress Doris Day, whose wholesome, all-American image was known globally and associated with the very essence of American domestic peace. Melcher's lineage and his professional success gave him immense cultural currency in Los Angeles, making his opinion the ultimate measure of acceptance in the music world's most powerful circles, and therefore a primary target for Manson's ambition for validation. Melcher, whose credits included popular groups like the Byrds and Paul Revere and the Raiders, took Wilson's plea seriously, agreeing to meet the strange musician as a favor to his friend and out of professional curiosity regarding this eccentric new artist. In 1968, he agreed to listen to Manson's material and possibly produce an album. The audition took place at Melcher's residence, an exclusive, secluded canyon estate at 1050 Cielo Drive in Beverly Hills, a highly coveted piece of real estate that symbolized Melcher's success and privilege. Manson, ever the showman, performed his songs, his guitar playing surprisingly competent. But his lyrics and presence were unnervingly intense, shifting abruptly between passive spirituality and aggressive demands, alarming those present. He spoke about his prophetic visions and his disdain for the mainstream establishment during the meeting, revealing a dangerous instability that transcended artistic eccentricity and hinted at underlying madness and violence. Melcher, accustomed to working with charismatic but erratic artists, recognized a disturbing element in Manson that transcended simple musical eccentricity. He found Manson's delivery unstable and his general presence chilling, sensing a deep, unmanageable malice beneath the veneer of the street performer, a threat that was not worth the risk to his professional reputation or personal safety, ultimately deciding to protect his own career and peace of mind. He determined that Manson was simply not marketable and declined to offer a record contract, ending the audition abruptly and decisively. This refusal, this simple decision, made in the best interest of his professional reputation and sanity, proved to be the catalyst for the terror that followed, triggering Manson's deepest feelings of rejection and humiliation at the hands of the establishment he believed owed him success. Wilson and Melcher, recognizing the inherent danger of having rejected Manson and fearing retaliation, attempted to mollify him. They paid him approximately $20,000 to leave the house and return to his commune, a sum intended to buy his silence and make him go away, a final desperate attempt to cleanse their hands of the cult leader and his unpredictable presence. But to Manson, the money was irrelevant. His goal was fame, acceptance by the establishment, and validation of his supposed genius. The rejection by Melcher, the son of Hollywood's most cherished star, was a profound personal insult to his ego, cementing his hatred for the system. Melcher was rejecting more than a musician. He was rejecting the counterculture's darkness, using the shield of old Hollywood's most beloved symbol, his mother, Doris Day, who stood for everything Manson resented. This act of familial protection unintentionally redirected the individual who would perpetrate the acts of aggression's fury, shifting the target from the producer to the symbol of the privilege and success he could not attain. Manson's ambition quickly curdled into resentment and a thirst for vengeance against the entire system that had spurned him. He did not forget the exact location of that rejection, the site of his ultimate professional failure and humiliation. The beautiful, secluded canyon house became, in his twisted mind, the symbol of Hollywood's hypocrisy and the embodiment of the people he now felt compelled to punish. The producer's simple professional decision effectively shifted the narrative from a struggling musician's story to one of a looming, devastating tragedy, transforming professional disappointment into a motive for mass aggression. This failure to achieve his dream set the stage for the catastrophic events that would soon unfold at that very same address, the physical manifestation of his bitter defeat, turning a rejection into a motive for ultimate retribution against the elite of the film and music worlds. An address of vengeance, the ghosts of Terry Melcher's former home. The address 150, Cielo Drive, was more than just a home. It was a physical symbol of the gilded, insulated world that Charles Manson desperately wanted to enter and, ultimately, felt compelled to destroy. When Terry Melcher and his then-girlfriend, actress Candice Bergen, moved out of the rental property in early 1969, Manson continued to haunt the address, occasionally stopping by uninvited to check on the status of the famous property and look for Melcher, unable to let go of the sight of his humiliation. He had been rejected there, and that location was now fixed in his mind as the center of his resentment. He knew the house was connected to the entertainment elite, and his vengeance was directed not only at Melcher, but at all those who represented the success he had been denied, the beautiful people who lived careless, privileged lives in the hills, oblivious to the darkness below them in the valley. The new tenants who moved into the sprawling estate in February of that year were a young couple at the absolute peak of Hollywood glamour. Film director Roman Polanski and his wife, actress Sharon Tate, a vision of the late Golden Age, whose fame was rapidly increasing. Known for her resemblance to the glamour models of the 1940s, Tate possessed a fragile, luminous elegance, a quality that intensified the contrast with the impending savagery and chaos. She represented the final, perfect illusion of Hollywood innocence, a quality Manson was determined to extinguish, viewing her as the quintessential Hollywood product that needed to be destroyed. She was just 26 years old and 8 months pregnant with her first child, a detail that added another layer of devastating innocence to the impending tragedy, a life brimming with potential about to be ended by senseless hatred. The home at Cielo Drive represented everything Manson despised and coveted: wealth, effortless fame, and familial bliss. Everything he felt the establishment had stolen from him and denied his own followers. The tragedy is that Manson likely knew Melcher was no longer the tenant, yet he sent his followers to the address anyway, demonstrating that his act was directed not at a specific person, but at the symbol of Hollywood success, the house itself being the target that represented his failure and all the society he wished to punish. Tate's life of glamour and promise stood in stark opposition to the raw, unbridled darkness that was closing in on the perimeter of Bel Air, crossing the invisible boundary between two worlds that should never have met and exposing the fragility of the affluent community. Tragically, Polanski was away in London, working on a new film project, leaving Tate, who was just weeks from giving birth, to host their guests. His absence created a perfect, undefended vulnerability that the family exploited, finding the house and its occupants completely unprepared for the assault. Their only protection, the assumption of their own safety, a fatal assumption of their protected status. On that night in August, Sharon Tate was hosting a few friends: coffee heiress Abigail Folger, her partner Wojciech Frykowski, and celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring. They were ordinary, wealthy young people, enjoying a typical Saturday night gathering in Los Angeles, talking about films and music, completely unaware that a rejected musician's obsession with their home had made them targets. They were simply celebrating life at the moment terror arrived, minutes before their world was destroyed, a profound instance of innocence meeting pure malice. The contrast is wrenching. Tate, the elegant, expectant mother surrounded by friends, and Manson, the vengeful sociopath dwelling in the desert, giving his chilling command to terrorize the inhabitants of his rejected stage, executing his dark fantasy. The stage was tragically set for a confrontation between the manufactured innocence of Hollywood and a genuine malevolence that had been allowed to fester. The address was the geographical point where Manson's personal rejection became a sweeping, indiscriminate attack on the city's self-image, permanently etching its name into the history of American true crime and marking the beginning of a terrifying new era. The glamour and the guilt, the night. Hollywood's innocence. Ended the night of August 9, 1969, marks the moment Hollywood's cultural innocence was irrevocably shattered. It was a clear, warm evening, a perfect night for a summer gathering in the canyons of Los Angeles, where the wealthy felt perfectly secure in their isolation, inside a bubble of privilege and assumed safety. Inside 150 Cielo Drive, Sharon Tate and her friends were engaged in quiet conversation and repose, enjoying the last moments of their carefree existence, oblivious to the horror approaching the gates under the cover of darkness. But on the outside, 4 of Charles Manson's followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, were preparing to carry out their leader's chilling instructions, to commit extreme acts of aggression and to make the victims feel fear, acting out a terrifying ritual of dominance and hatred against the symbols of the society they resented. The brutality was meant to shock the world. The victims of that night represented the very essence of the era's youth, glamour, and optimism. Jay Sebring, the highly respected hairstylist, had styled some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including Frank Sinatra and Steve McQueen. He was known for his elegant clientele and his trend-setting salons, a true artist of the era's glamour, whose life was one of professional aspiration realized. Abigail Folger was the heiress to a vast coffee fortune, representing the intersection of American legacy wealth and the new Hollywood social scene, using her inheritance to become involved in liberal causes, trying to make the world better through social change. Wojciech Frykowski was a Polish screenwriter and a friend of Roman Polanski, an intellectual drawn to the creative energy of LA. And Sharon Tate was a star whose career had just begun to soar, poised for major stardom and starting a family, embodying the promise of a generation about to be tragically cut short. The senseless nature of the crime and the youth and promise of the victims were what profoundly traumatized the entertainment industry, making the loss feel so acute and personal to everyone working in show business. The savagery of the aggression was shocking, far beyond the scope of anything Los Angeles had previously witnessed, suggesting a depravity that was alien to the community's usual crimes. The attackers targeted these innocent people as part of an attempt to start a race war, which Manson had termed Helter Skelter. The scene discovered the next morning was one of incomprehensible tragedy, a stark and brutal intrusion into a world that believed its wealth and seclusion guaranteed safety. The sight of the lavish estate marred by such devastation became the defining, horrifying image of the era's collapse, a visual representation of the shattered dream that went worldwide. The immediate aftermath was characterized by pervasive, chilling fear. Hollywood stars, who had lived their lives in carefully manicured luxury, suddenly felt vulnerable, realizing their names and fame were actually targets, rather than protection from the dangers of the street. The irony was devastating. These were not crimes of passion or professional rivalry. They were random acts of aggression, carried out by individuals who simply saw the house as a symbol of the establishment they had been ordered to terrorize, an assault on the very concept of the Hollywood dream and the affluence it represented. The immense tragedy of Sharon Tate's passing, particularly given her advanced pregnancy, galvanized a unique kind of grief and rage in the public imagination. It was a loss that went far beyond the film industry, striking at the heart of the community's future and sense of security. It represented the moment the carefree spirit of the 1960s, the so-called Summer of Love, transitioned into a dark, paranoid suspicion. The psychological impact on the industry was instant. Fences went up, security personnel were hired en masse, and the open-door policy of the LA canyons was replaced by suspicion and fear. Hollywood's gilded cage suddenly felt terribly fragile, a place where dreams were now guarded by armed watchmen, and the innocence was forever lost, replaced by an enduring sense of dread that lingered over the hills. Helter Skelter's true meaning: the unrelated victims of the second night. The night following the devastation at Cielo Drive, Charles Manson proved that his acts were not merely directed by the simple desire for revenge against Terry Melcher, but were part of a wider, twisted, ideological plan to ignite widespread chaos. Dissatisfied with the chaos caused by his followers, Manson took a more active role in the second set of acts of aggression, driving them personally to the scene and instructing them directly. His objective was to create maximum panic and confusion, specifically targeting victims who had no direct connection to the stars, to make the crimes appear random and uncontrollable, thereby amplifying the city's terror and the feeling that anyone could be next. He wanted the aggression to seem like the beginning of an anticipated societal upheaval, the spark that would ignite his apocalyptic vision of Helter Skelter and bring about the turmoil he prophesied. Manson drove the family to a home in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. The victims were Leno Labianca, a wealthy supermarket executive and the head of the Labianca supermarket chain, and his wife, Rosemary, who owned a dress shop. The Labiancas were completely unconnected to the film or music industry, having built their success outside of the Hollywood machine, making their selection a terrifying demonstration of indiscriminate malice and random targeting of affluent residents. The acts that took place that night were more focused on ritualistic terror, explicitly ordered by Manson to send a clear message to the authorities and the public. Manson himself restrained the couple before sending his followers inside to complete the acts of aggression. He reportedly directed them to be more savage, attempting to leave behind clear signs that the acts were not common criminal acts, using the environment to create chilling messages intended to implicate political or racial groups and disguise his true motives. The term helter-skelter, scrawled in blood on the refrigerator, referred to Manson's apocalyptic prophecy, a coming race war that he believed was imminent and that he wanted to incite. The passing of the Labiancas, entirely separate from the Tate circle, confirmed the nature of Manson's larger, terroristic goal, moving the violence beyond simple revenge into the realm of domestic terror that gripped the entire city, proving no one was safe. The public reaction to the second night of aggression was one of pure, unadulterated fear, far exceeding the panic of the first night. The 2 nights of devastation, the beautiful actress and her glamorous friends, followed by the unassuming business couple, confirmed to the media and the public that a terrifying, uncontrolled force was loose in Los Angeles. This double blow effectively broke the city's spirit, as no one, regardless of social status or neighborhood, felt safe from the seemingly random yet calculated violence that was spreading. The Labianca acts, in particular, underscored the sheer randomness and evil of Manson's control over his followers and the depth of his delusion. It was the moment the dream of the counterculture came to an end. The hippie movement, which had once been associated with peace and love, was now inextricably linked in the public mind with substance use, cults, and unspeakable acts of aggression. Manson's crimes became a cultural marker for the end of the 1960s idealism, the final, brutal punctuation mark on a decade of excess and experimentation. The fact that the Labiancas had no discernible connection to Hollywood only intensified the panic among the stars, proving that anyone could be a target, even those living quiet, successful lives away from the celebrity spotlight, shattering any sense of domestic peace and security in the city. We have now followed the chilling path of Charles Manson, from his desperate ambition to the trial that exposed his horrific acts of aggression against Hollywood. The revelations about the celebrity connections, Dennis Wilson's invitation, Terry Melcher's rejection, and the trauma of Sharon Tate demonstrate how fragile the boundaries between glamour and darkness truly are, and how close danger was to the heart of the movie industry. We are so grateful that you join us for these deep dives into the forgotten history of the Golden Age. We are always looking for the next great story to explore. Please, leave a comment below sharing which individual, Dennis Wilson, the haunted musician, or Terry Melcher, the son of innocence, do you believe paid the highest personal price for Manson's infiltration? And explain your reasoning. And as always, tell us what untold story of old Hollywood you need us to explore next, giving us specific names or events. The Western set, Hideout, How a TV Legend Sheltered Manson's Cult. As the city descended into panic, the authorities struggled to comprehend the motive behind the devastation, initially dismissing the acts as a substance-fueled home invasion, before realizing the coordinated and ritualistic nature of the crimes. Charles Manson and his family disappeared into the one place where Hollywood's debris often settles, the abandoned, dusty backlots of the Western movie industry. Their sanctuary was Spahn Ranch, a sprawling, run-down parcel of land in the Chatsworth area of the San Fernando Valley, the perfect, low-profile refuge, far from the scrutiny of Beverly Hills police. Spahn Ranch was, in its own right, a relic of the Golden Age. This very ground was where John Wayne and Gene Autry once filmed their classics, providing the backdrop for countless cinematic heroes. It had been used for decades as a set for countless B-Western films and television shows, providing a cinematic authenticity for cowboys and outlaws. By the late 1960s, the ranch was falling into disrepair, becoming a ghost town of false storefronts and dusty trails, a place mostly forgotten by the major studios and the authorities, making it ideal for the family. Its owner was George Spahn, an elderly, nearly blind man who was a former minor film actor and stuntman alongside figures like Gary Cooper, a man whose memories were rooted in the glamour of the 1940s and whose physical limitations made him easy prey for the manipulative cult. Spahn was a remnant of old Hollywood, living in isolation among the decaying sets. He was easily manipulated by Manson and his female followers, who tended to his needs and provided companionship, exploiting his vulnerability and offering a perverse form of care and pseudo-intimate attention. In exchange for the family doing chores, providing company, and attending to his personal needs, Spahn allowed the entire cult to live on his property without paying rent. The ranch offered the perfect, sprawling cover for the group, allowing them to remain hidden in plain sight, living amid the props and facades of a bygone era, occasionally receiving visitors who were part of the low-budget film community, who were none the wiser about the darkness lurking there, mistaking the family for harmless hippies camping out. The irony is profound. A notorious criminal and his cult were being sheltered on the property of a man who had dedicated his life to creating the very fantasies that Hollywood sold, the perfect camouflage for their evil activities and a symbol of the discarded past. The ranch provided the family with a psychological shield. They were surrounded by the illusions of the film industry, the same industry that had rejected Manson, and this proximity allowed Manson to maintain his sense of Hollywood destiny, even as he was pursued by the authorities, perpetuating his delusions of fame and influence by living among the remnants of the dream. While living at the ranch, the family continued to have interactions with low-level Hollywood workers, stuntmen, writers, and production crew who occasionally used the facility. Manson continued to try and leverage these small connections, still clinging to his dream of a record deal, even as he was plotting acts of aggression and attempting to influence the local substance and music scenes, showcasing the stubborn nature of his Hollywood obsession that refused to fade even after his devastating professional rejection. The discovery and eventual raid of Spahn Ranch, which followed the tragedies, became a symbol of Hollywood's final confrontation with the darkness it had unintentionally fostered, a collision between the golden past and the terrifying present. The fact that Manson's family, who had just committed unspeakable acts, were living under the nose of a former B-movie cowboy on an abandoned set was the ultimate disturbing cinematic twist. This bizarre hiding place, rooted in the very history of filmmaking, concluded Manson's journey from parolee to the ultimate villain of the Hollywood dream, forever associating the innocent landscape of the Western film genre with unspeakable horror and revealing the depths of the rot beneath the surface. Hollywood's panic, the weak. Hollywood built walls and bought protection. The immediate aftermath of the Tate Labianca acts of aggression was not simply a local news story. It was a psychological emergency for the entire Hollywood community. The brutal, random nature of the devastation shattered the fundamental illusion of safety that had always protected the wealthy and famous of Beverly Hills, Bel Air, and Laurel Canyon. The long-held belief that fame and fortune could buy immunity from real-world suffering was instantly proven false, replacing complacency with a terror that money could not solve and that threatened their very existence and way of life. Before August 1969, the homes of stars were open and accessible, reflecting the prevailing culture of free expression and relaxed security, with minimal concern for intruders or crime. After the tragedies, that vanished overnight. The week following the discovery was characterized by a frantic, expensive effort to secure lives and properties. The rich and famous, the very people who had benefited most from the Hollywood machine, descended into paranoia and fear, unsure who their neighbors truly were and whether they were the next targets of the seemingly random cult. Physical barriers went up instantly. Contractors were hired around the clock to install high, opaque security gates, where once there had been open driveways, changing the aesthetic of the hills permanently. signaling the end of the open-door policy. The demand for armed security personnel soared, reaching unprecedented levels as the stars sought professional protection. Many stars hired 24-hour protection, turning their homes into literal fortresses, complete with intercoms and elaborate surveillance systems, transforming their lives into self-imposed prisons of luxury. The once glamorous Hollywood Hills became a landscape of fear, guarded by watchdogs and floodlights, a visible sign of the community's sudden retreat from the outside world and its deep-seated terror. High-profile figures experienced deep, genuine fear. Actress Mia Farrow and her former husband, Frank Sinatra, temporarily moved out of Los Angeles, feeling their safety was compromised and that they were actively being targeted by the unseen enemy, choosing temporary exile over remaining vulnerable. The trauma deeply affected Terry Melcher and his mother, Doris Day. Day, the picture of wholesome American virtue, became fiercely protective of her son, urging him to remain secluded and to fortify his home against any further actions by Manson's followers, effectively keeping him under protective house arrest and cutting off all access to outsiders. Melcher, realizing he was the intended target, lived in a constant state of anxiety, eventually moving to a secure facility in Malibu. Unable to tolerate the psychological burden of living in the place Manson had sought to destroy, his life forever changed by the producer's decision to say no. The cultural shift was permanent. The incident marked the definitive end of the Golden Age's innocence. The open, experimental, trust-filled ethos of the 1960s counterculture was replaced by suspicion and profound distrust of outsiders, especially hitchhikers or anyone who seemed too unconventional, destroying the era's idealism and carefree attitude. The acts of aggression provided a painful lesson. The line between the beautiful dreams Hollywood manufactured and the brutal realities of the world could be crossed in an instant, and fame provided no shield. The money and fame that had bought them comfort could not buy them safety from the darkness they had accidentally allowed to infiltrate their sphere. For weeks, the city was crippled by the fear that the acts would continue, demonstrating the profound psychological damage inflicted by Manson's terrifying reach. A paranoia that would change the architecture and social life of Hollywood for decades to come, creating the walled enclaves we recognize today, and ushering in an era of guarded isolation and suspicion. In the spotlight of truth, Dennis Wilson and the Day. He testified the trial of Charles Manson and his followers, which began in 1970, became a global spectacle, a bizarre, dark reflection of Hollywood itself, where the courtroom was transformed into a theatrical stage for madness and legal warfare, captivating the nation. It was high drama played out in a courtroom, dominated by the relentless efforts of prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi, who masterfully connected the seemingly random acts to Manson's twisted, helter-skelter motive and the infiltration of the elite. But the most emotionally complex and personally difficult testimony came from the one celebrity who had unwittingly provided the villain his entry point, Dennis Wilson, who was forced to confront his devastating error publicly. Wilson's decision to testify was fraught with internal conflict and immense danger. By that time, he was deeply troubled by his own substance use issues and was living with the profound guilt of having introduced Manson to the Hollywood scene, a guilt that ate away at him daily and damaged his relationships with his family and bandmates. He was genuinely terrified of the remaining Manson family members who had openly threatened his life and continued to harass his associates, forcing him to be constantly vigilant and fear for his safety. His testimony was required to establish the timeline of Manson's entry into L.A., his ambition for a record contract, and his rage following the rejection. All critical evidence for the prosecution's case to demonstrate motive and escalation, making his role pivotal, yet agonizing and deeply personal. Appearing in court, Wilson was a shadow of the carefree beach boy idol, his personal struggles clearly visible to the public and the jury. He was reluctant, his memory often hazy due to his struggles. But his presence was vital, offering irrefutable proof of Manson's connection to the Hollywood elite and his desperation for fame. He corroborated the story of Manson's musical ambition, the failed audition at Cielo Drive, and his own attempts to placate the growing rage of the cult leader. His testimony was a painful public admission of a profound failure in judgment, revealing the personal chaos that lay beneath his public persona and exposing his own vulnerabilities to the world, a moment of tragic public reckoning that deeply impacted his life. The cost to Wilson's personal life and career was enormous. The constant fear and the emotional toll contributed to a long, tragic spiral of personal difficulty that haunted him until his passing. He lost his home, his sense of security, and much of his personal stability to the memory of those few months, unable to shake the darkness that had briefly resided in his life, feeling responsible for the ensuing tragedy. The music he made after the events was often colored by a darkness that reflected his inner turmoil, a stark departure from the sunny sound of his group, permanently altering his artistic direction and personal trajectory towards despair. Meanwhile, Terry Melcher, protected by his mother Doris Day's immense influence and wealth, was eventually moved to a completely secluded facility for his safety. Day, whose public image was synonymous with happiness, quietly spent large sums to ensure her son's protection, demonstrating the powerful, behind-the-scenes actions that stars took to shield their families from the public danger, using their influence as a final line of defense against the cult's persistent threat and the relentless media scrutiny. The courtroom testimony of Dennis Wilson was the definitive moment when Manson's infiltration was laid bare for the world to see. It showed that the family's acts were not random, but were deeply, inextricably linked to the music and film industry's elite. Wilson's appearance was a final, devastating spotlight on the personal trauma of the stars who had been caught in the whirlwind of a rejected, violent fantasy, forced to testify against the nightmare they had accidentally created and forever bearing the burden of that unintended consequence that destroyed so many lives. The legacy of fear, how Manson ended the golden age of innocence. Charles Manson's celebrity connections may have been his ladder into Hollywood, but his horrific acts became the wrecking ball that demolished the dreams and innocence of an entire era. The damage was not simply measured in the loss of life, but in the permanent scar left on the cultural psyche of Los Angeles and the film industry. The incident became a definitive, traumatic turning point in American history, marking the moment when the optimism of the 1960s gave way to cynicism and a pervasive sense of vulnerability, a turning point that historians frequently cite. Manson, in many ways, was a terrifying product of the 1960s excesses. He took the era's philosophies of free love, substance use, and anti-authoritarianism, and distorted them into a mandate for extreme acts of aggression, weaponizing the very freedoms that defined the decade against the society that granted them. His ability to manipulate the children of the middle and upper classes exposed a frightening vacuum of meaning among certain privileged youth, a vacuum that Hollywood's relentless pursuit of glamour had unintentionally helped to create by focusing on surface appearances rather than substance, leaving many feeling spiritually empty and searching for radical fulfillment outside of the traditional bounds of society. The long-term consequences for the surviving celebrities were profound. Roman Polanski, the husband of Sharon Tate, was consumed by grief and never truly recovered from the devastation. He became an emotional fugitive, his career forever framed by the events of that night, and the tragedy colored every aspect of his subsequent life and work, driving a permanent darkness into his art and his public image, marking him as a survivor of unspeakable horror. Dennis Wilson's life continued on a difficult path, and he ultimately passed away in a tragic accidental incident at sea in 1983, never escaping the immense burden of his association with Manson, a shadow that followed him until the end of his tumultuous life. Terry Melcher spent years in seclusion, constantly looking over his shoulder, his safety ensured only by his mother's immense devotion, forever paranoid that he was the true target of the cult's lingering menace and unable to relax his guard. The film industry itself changed its relationship with its public. The open, trusting connection between the stars and their fans, a hallmark of the Golden Age, was replaced by cynicism and high walls. Security became a prerequisite, not an option, instantly changing the cost of living in the hills and the cost of fame itself. The star system, which had once cultivated an image of approachable elegance, retreated behind layers of protection and distance, permanently altering the dynamics of celebrity access and reinforcing the divide between the stars and their audience, creating an isolated, wary elite who rarely interacted with the public unguarded. Manson's crimes also exposed the limits of the studio system's power. In the earlier Golden Age, the studios could effectively bury scandals, manage divorces, and even fabricate identities, controlling public narratives completely. But the shocking, real-world violence of the family was unmanageable. It could not be spun, covered up, or dismissed as a minor indiscretion. It was a genuine tragedy that shattered the system's ability to control its own narrative, proving that the chaos of the real world could not be contained by publicity machines or Hollywood magic, marking a definitive shift in the power dynamic between the stars and the world. As a story, Manson's infiltration of Hollywood serves as a final, brutal chapter for the Golden Age. It reminds us that the quest for fame, when driven by pure ego and psychopathy, can have devastating, indiscriminate consequences. The elegance, the studio control, the carefully constructed innocence, the whole magnificent Hollywood facade was gone. The stars who built the dream were forced to confront a reality far darker than any film they ever made, learning that the magic of the movies offered no protection from real-world evil. The innocence of Hollywood was tragically sacrificed on the altar of one man's rejected musical ambition, leaving a permanent shadow across the gilded hills of California. The full, complicated humanity of those involved, the vulnerability of Wilson, the protectiveness of Doris Day, the elegance of Sharon Tate, makes the tragedy all the more poignant, resonating with a deep historical sadness that continues to echo in the canyons today. We hope this journey through one of Hollywood's most challenging and devastating historical episodes has provided you with a deeper, more complete understanding of the fragile period that marked the end of an era. These stories remind us that even in the brightest moments of glamour, real-world danger and profound human vulnerability always existed, often just behind the curtain of perfection, waiting to be unleashed. If this story has moved you and deepened your appreciation for the complex history of classic cinema, please take a moment to hit the like button and share this video with others who appreciate the sophistication and drama of Hollywood's past, helping us continue to bring these important historical narratives to light. Until next time, this is Golden Age Files, continuing to explore the true stories that lie just beneath the surface of the silver screen. Thank you for watching.